Celestial Pharaohs, Asteroid Mining Station, AMS 2724, 224 million kilometers from Earth. Commander Sarah Chen squinted at the holographic display, her practiced eyes scanning the topographical data streaming from the surface probes. After 18 months on station, she knew every crater and crevice of this particular rock, which was why the anomaly stopped her cold. Computer, enhance grid sector E17. The image zoomed, revealing perfectly straight lines cutting through the asteroid's natural contours. Impossible geometric patterns emerged from the chaos of space-weathered rock. Run structural analysis. Numbers cascaded down the left side of her display. Density readings, compositional data, thermal imaging. None of it made sense. The structure, and it was definitely a structure, appeared to be carved from a single piece of stone, yet showed signs of internal chambers and passageways. Jesus, Chen whispered, reaching for the comm panel. Houston, this is AMS 2724. We have a situation. NASA headquarters, Houston, Texas. 48 hours later, Dr. Omar Hassan stood before the assembled panel, acutely aware of the skepticism radiating from the room. His controversial theories about advanced engineering in ancient Egypt had made him a pariah in academic circles. Now, ironically, those same theories had brought him here. The hieroglyphs are unmistakable, he said, gesturing to the high-resolution images. This isn't just similar to Egyptian writing, it is Egyptian writing. The cartouches, the astronomical symbols, even the style of carving matches examples from the 4th dynasty. That's impossible, Dr. Elena Torres interrupted. The astronomer leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. You're suggesting ancient Egyptians built structures in space? The evidence is right there. Hassan highlighted specific symbols. These stellar configurations, they match astronomical records from papyri dated to 2500 BCE, but they're showing perspectives that would only be visible from space. General Andrew Wallace cleared his throat. Let's focus on practical matters. If this structure is artificial, it has strategic implications. We need to secure the site before... The general's phone buzzed, then everyone else's devices started chiming simultaneously. Hassan pulled out his phone to see breaking news alerts flooding the screen. Mysterious structure, discovered on asteroid, ancient Egyptian artifacts found in space? China demands international access to AMS 2724. Wallace cursed under his breath. So much for operational security. This just became a global issue. Hassan barely heard him. He was still staring at the hieroglyphs, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. If he was right, and he knew he was, everything humans thought they knew about ancient civilization was wrong. We need to move quickly, he said. These aren't just random markings, they're a message. And if I'm reading them correctly, they're meant to be found now, at this specific moment in time. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Outside, news helicopters were already circling the building. Somewhere in Beijing, Moscow, and a dozen other capitals, similar meetings were taking place. The race for humanity's true history had begun. And deep in space, ancient mechanisms stirred to life, awakening after millennia of waiting. Asteroid Mining Station, AMS 2724, 1 week later. The cutting laser died with a final hiss, completing the precise circular incision around the stone doorway. Commander Chen watched the pressure readings carefully as the ancient seal broke for the first time in millennia. Atmosphere holding stable, she reported. No decompression. Dr. Hassan pressed his gloved hand against the stone surface. Despite the vacuum of space, despite 45 centuries of cosmic radiation, the stone felt warm, almost alive. "Ready for breach," General Wallace announced. His security team stood ready, weapons drawn. The general had insisted on military presence despite Hassan's protests. The massive door swung inward with surprising ease, revealing a sight that made Hassan's breath catch in his throat. "My God!" Dr. Torres whispered. Before them stretched a vast chamber, easily 1/2 kilometre across, carved into the heart of the asteroid. But carved wasn't the right word. The walls were perfectly smooth, almost glassy, yet showed no tool marks. Corridors branched off in geometric patterns, their walls covered in hieroglyphs that seemed to emit their own soft light. "Those symbols," Hassan said, moving closer, "they're using the Medjed dialect. It was only used in the most sacred texts dealing with cosmic matters." He ran his scanner over the glowing characters. "The pigments, they're not paint. They're some kind of semiconductor material." "Over here," Chen called out. She stood before what appeared to be a control panel, its surface inscribed with familiar Egyptian symbols, arranged in unfamiliar patterns. "These markings match the configurations we use for stellar navigation. Exact matches." Wallace's radio crackled. "Sir, we're getting energy readings from deeper inside, like nothing we've ever seen." The team moved further in, their helmet lights revealing more impossible discoveries. Storage chambers held perfectly preserved artifacts, tools that combined ancient Egyptian craftsmanship with materials that shouldn't exist. One room contained what appeared to be spacesuits, built to dimensions matching human bodies, but constructed using technology far beyond anything currently possible. "Look at this," Torres said, studying a vast circular map embedded in one wall. "These are star charts, but they show stellar positions from multiple vantage points, including some that would only be visible from..." She trailed off, double-checking her calculations. "From Andromeda." Hassan had stopped before a massive hieroglyphic inscription. His hands trembled as he translated. "By grace of the star givers, who showed us the paths between worlds," he read. "We built this waypoint to mark their return. There's more references to something called the Great Cycle and energy conductors beneath the pyramids." "Dr. Hassan," one of Wallace's men called from an adjacent chamber. "You need to see this." They found him standing before a wall covered in mathematical equations. Dr. Torres gasped. "That's impossible," she said. "These are quantum field equations, Hawking radiation calculations, things we only discovered in the last 50 years. But they're written in ancient Egyptian mathematical notation." "General," Hassan said quietly, "I don't think the Egyptians built this place alone. I think they were given this knowledge, and I think whoever gave it to them meant for us to find it now." Wallace was about to respond when a low hum filled the chamber. The hieroglyphs began pulsing with increasing intensity. "Energy spike!" Chen shouted. "Something's activating!" The wall before them seemed to ripple, symbols rearranging themselves into new patterns. A circular design emerged resembling a calendar or countdown clock. 7 days, Hassan translated, his voice hollow. "We have 7 days until something. The text mentions an alignment, but these symbols..." He shook his head. "They're warning us about something coming, something returning." "What's returning?" Wallace demanded. Before Hassan could answer, their radios exploded with static. Through the interference, they could just make out Houston's transmission. "AMS 2724, be advised we're tracking multiple unauthorized launches from China, Russia and India. They're headed your way. ETA 72 hours. Wallace cursed. "Secure everything. No one touches anything else until we understand what we're dealing with." He turned to Hassan. "You have 7 days to figure this out, Doctor. After that, I'm not taking any chances." Hassan barely heard him. He was still staring at the countdown, watching ancient symbols, tick away humanity's remaining time of ignorance. Whatever the star-givers were, wherever they'd gone, they were coming back. And somehow the Egyptians had known exactly when. Asteroid mining station AMS 2724, T minus 6 hours. Multiple bogies incoming, Chen announced, her eyes fixed on the radar display. Chinese Long March, Russian Soyuz, at least 5 unauthorized vessels approaching. In the central chamber, Hassan worked frantically to decipher the final sections of hieroglyphs. The countdown glowed ominously, its ancient symbols steadily marking humanity's remaining time. "This isn't a mining outpost," he said. "It's a beacon. The Egyptians built it as a warning system." Wallace paced, his boots echoing on the crystalline floor. "Warning about what?" "The star-givers, the beings who gave them this technology." Hassan's translation software blinked with new results. The inscriptions described them as those who test. Every few thousand years they return to evaluate civilizations that reach space. "Evaluate for what?" Torres asked. Before Hassan could answer, the station's sensors screamed. A private shuttle had just breached their perimeter bearing the Sentient Core corporate logo. "They're attempting to dock," Chen reported. "Chinese vessel right behind them." Wallace grabbed his comm unit. "This is US General Wallace. You are entering restricted space. Turn back or—" The station shuddered. Warning lights flashed as multiple ships initiated forced docking procedures. "They're all coming," Chen said grimly. "Everyone wants what's in here." Hassan turned back to the walls, which had begun to pulse with increasing intensity. "You don't understand. This isn't about claiming technology. The star-givers, they weren't teachers. They were filters." The first explosions rocked the station as rival teams breached the outer airlocks. Wallace's security forces moved to defensive positions. "The pyramids," Hassan continued, his voice rising with urgency. "They weren't just tombs. They were markers, power collectors building energy for this moment. The Egyptians fled because they weren't ready for the test. And neither are we." The countdown reached its final minutes. Throughout the station, ancient mechanisms hummed to life. The hieroglyphs began moving, flowing like liquid mercury across the walls. "General," Hassan pleaded, "we have to evacuate. When this activates—" A blinding light filled the chamber. Every symbol, every marking on every wall blazed with impossible energy. Star charts appeared, showing humanity's true place in a cosmos far vaster and more terrifying than they'd imagined. Chen's comm unit erupted with panicked transmissions from Earth. Reports of gravitational anomalies, massive energy signatures appearing worldwide. The pyramids at Giza were emanating radiation patterns never before recorded. "My God," Torres whispered, staring at her instruments. "Something's answering." The signal burst outward from AMS 2724, carrying humanity's signature to the stars. And something in the void stirred in response. 4 weeks later, banks of the Nile. Hassan sat alone in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the stars wheel overhead. The government had classified everything, erased all records of what happened on AMS 2724. The rival teams had been quietly sent home, bound by international agreements of silence. But he knew the truth couldn't be buried forever. In his research since returning, he'd found the pattern. Ancient Sumer, the Mayans, other civilizations, all had reached for the stars. All had encountered the star-givers, and all had retreated in fear of what they'd found. Iti was part of a great cycle, a cosmic test repeated across millennia. Each time a civilization reached space, the beacon activated. Each time they faced the choice: advance and be judged, or retreat and wait for the next cycle. The Egyptians had chosen retreat. Modern humanity's choice still lay ahead. Above him, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere in the darkness between them, ancient intelligences waited, watching humanity's next move with inhuman patience. Hassan checked his watch. In a few hours he would meet with a contact at Oxford University. The cycle had to be documented, preserved for future generations. Because next time the stars aligned, humanity would need to be ready. Next time they would have to face the test. The first rays of sun touched the pyramids, their ancient stones holding secrets deeper than anyone had guessed. Hassan stood, brushing sand from his clothes. The star-givers were out there, waiting, and sooner or later they would return.